Hello, everyone. Welcome to What's Art Got to Do with It? I'm joined this evening by author, poet, and musician Elizabeth Cunningham. I'm so excited to have you here this evening, Elizabeth. Really
Oh,
looking
thank you,
forward
Deb. Glad
to
to
our
be here.
discussion. You are best known for the Maeve Chronicles, a series of award-winning novels featuring a feisty Celtic Magdalene. You've recorded Maven Song, an album of original music from the Maeve Chronicles. We're going to hear some music this evening. You are the author and illustrator of the Book of Madge, a graphic novel and the source of the Maeve Chronicles. You are the author of 4 collections of poems, and we're going to hear a poem this evening. Murder at the Rummage Sale was your debut mystery novel. All the Perils of This Night just came out this past August. It's a standalone thriller and a sequel to Murder at the Rummage Sale. You have many, many other books that you have written. I'm just giving a few highlights here. You're a fellow emeritus of Black Earth Institute, and you write regularly for Feminism and Religion blog site. You are also a private counselor. Welcome.
That about covers it. Thank you so much, Deb. It's great to be here.
It's wonderful to be with you. And, I think an appropriate place to start would be your spiritual background.
Oh, yeah. Well, and you can find out more about it in Murder at the Rummage Sale because that is set in 1960 when I was a kid. So I grew up in a small town in the Hudson Valley. My father was the Episcopal priest of a small church, and I guess it was in the 1950s and early 60s. And so I grew up in the churchyard and in the church. And I think that as I've said a number of times, that gave me a lot of primary material. That gave me a lot to work through, but it also gave me a lot to work with because the liturgy and the language that I was exposed to so young through hearing rather than through reading, I think really affected my sense of, not that I write like the King James Version of the Bible, but it gave me a sense that words have to have sound and rhythm. And a lot can be forgiven because there were some pretty scary words, but they were beautiful. So, yeah.
There are some very scary words. Very scary words.
Very scary words. And it's scary when my father wasn't a warm and fuzzy father. And, in those days, the minister always was above the congregation in the pulpit. Now they like to get, like come down and, shake your hands and be folks, but not them.
Right.
They were up there and Jesus was up there and God was there. And next door was of woods that had gotten overgrown and fallen into disuse, an old estate. And there was, of course, no trespassing signs on it. And so Episcopalians, when they say the Lord's Prayer, they say, "Forgive us our trespasses." So that got completely merged in my mind. Going over the wall into the woods, yeah.
Yeah. And how wonderful, how enchanting. What did that place become for you?
The experience of walking from one world into another really has affected probably every book I've written. There's always some sense of going between the worlds.
Yeah.
And over that gap in the wall. Because eventually we did get permission to walk there, but there were a couple of times I really seriously trespassed. And the other really scary thing from my childhood was that my father's name was Cunningham and the town constable's name was Cunningham. So law, religion, fathers, God, going into the forbidden wood, it was all, like I say, it's pretty good material. And I think I'm still working with it. I've worked with it, in one way or another most of my life.
You were young in that space and all these other things were quite large around you. So there's the largeness that comes from simply being a child, right?
A child, yeah.
And so how long were you in that space?
My father, when I was 12, I think 12, maybe just turning 13, my father decided, and this was, I guess, probably almost the mid 60s. He decided that he wanted to be an activist. And he was an activist, even within the parish church. And he was always organizing things and being ecumenical before anybody else was. He used to, He was the first Episcopal minister to join the fire department. And he was the first Episcopal minister to go to a Roman Catholic wake. So the people of the town really loved him. And he wanted to go to the firemen's clam bakes. And after the clam bake, when the women and the children went home, the men drank beer and they watched film. And somebody said, Father, I want to go home now. And he said, hell no. So he stayed and watched the pornographic films with the firemen and drank beer. He was that kind of a minister. He was very, he really was a social gospel minister. And he went to march with Martin Luther King. He was very passionate about civil rights. And that really comes out a lot in the book that I just published, All the Perils of This Night. So he left the parish ministry to, I think you'd call it, be a community organizer with the Office of Economic Opportunity, which lived for a little while under the Johnson administration in the war on poverty.
Do you have any recollections of the congregation or the people that would attend the church?
Well, I think it was very interesting. I see now, a lot of people sort of grew up in the little separate house and the little separate yard, but I grew up in the midst of a community. So people were always coming and going, which I think was very hard on my mother, which is reflected in the book. But I remember a lot of the parishioners, and they really show up. Portraits of them show up in Murder at the Rummage Sale. And my sister and I were in the choir, I think, before we could read. I think we probably learned to read music and words simultaneously. And there was a very peppery little organist, brilliant musician. I think she was a refugee from Germany. Her stories, I tried to recreate it a little bit in Murder at the Rummage Sale, but she was a very fierce musician. And so there are all these other adults around. I think I really bonded with the woman that I modeled Lucy Way on, who I call my fairy godmother. I sort of discovered her in my teens rather than in my childhood. But all those people are quite vivid to me. And, because it was the 50s and 60s, some women worked, but a lot of women were home. And so their need to work and do things and create was, they went to things like the church or became members of the garden club or volunteered at this and that. That was how they had an outlet. So there was a lot of women around, and they ran the portion supper, and they ran the rummage sale, and they ran everything.
Right.
So I think that probably, definitely affected me to grow up in a community like that. It wasn't at all the feminism wasn't happening then, as any of them knew. But there was a bunch of strong women around for sure.
I also understand that at some point in your life, you became a Quaker.
Yeah. Well, that happened along with my marriage, because I married someone who's basically an agnostic or an atheist. And when he would go to church with me, he'd be like, I feel like an anthropologist. I'm in a strange culture. This is too weird. And when we lived in Florida, I could not find an Episcopal church. I tried to find an Episcopal church. I don't think I've ever told this story. The Episcopal minister came to visit Douglas and I before we were married. And he came in a big ecclesiastical outfit with a huge pectoral cross. And he wanted to discuss the fact that we were living in sin. And he also was very concerned because I had mentioned that I was writing The Wild Mother. And The Wild Mother has at its heart Lilith, who is sort of the apocryphal first wife of Adam.
Right.
But in his mind, Lilith was a demon. So he wanted to say, oh my goodness, there's this woman living in sin, maybe worshiping demons. I think I better get over there to this little shack in the swamp. And that was I think that was the last time I tried to go to the Episcopal church. And I think before he left, he said, I hope I hope you'll be in church again next Sunday, because it's really upsetting to me, because sometimes I visit people and I never see them again. Yeah. And he never saw us again. And Douglas said that he was an agnostic, told the guy he was an agnostic, and he said, well, do you know what agnostic is in Latin? ignoramus. So yeah, I found a Quaker meeting.
Yes, I can.
And as soon as I found a Quaker meeting, I thought, oh, and I had some Quaker ancestors on my mother's side, but I didn't really know Quakers very well. But I loved the fact that we sat in a circle face to face. That's where you found God, not up there, but in
Yeah,
the person sitting across from
with
you.
each other. Yeah, yeah.
And I loved it. I loved the silence, and I loved the fact that you didn't have to sit there a captive audience to some minister.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, that anybody who was moved to speak spoke from the
Yes.
silence, and I loved that.
Yes.
I mean, I have this passage in where Maeve has to go to a synagogue in Nazareth or something, and I don't know. There's people giving little sermonettes, and she amuses herself by counting all the places where they could have ended it. I used to do that. I still do that. If I have to listen to a sermon, it's like that would be a good place to end it. And they usually go 6 more
On
times.
and on and on. Yeah.
It's like, no, that's a really good ending sentence.
Yeah. 10 false endings. Oh, good God. Yes.
So I loved the Quaker, and not that somebody couldn't go on and on as a Quaker, but they didn't have that kind of I'm the minister and you have to listen to me. It's like the spirit moved them, the spirit moved them,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and anyone could speak. And I loved that.
So there's a gap of time in our conversation here where you were young, you were living in New York with your parents, and you were in Florida, you became a Quaker, you
Mhm.
were with Douglas.
We were Quakers when we came back here
You were
too.
Quakers when you came back,
Yeah,
and at some
for
point
10 years.
okay, all right, so that's significant.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I still Quaker process where Quakers they do things by consensus or what they call the sense of the meeting, which is not voting. That was a very valuable thing to learn from Quakers.
mm,
I use that actually as a counselor. I help people find consensus in within themselves,
yes. Yes,
and
that's
it's useful with families. All of the things that I learned from Quakers are really good for when you work with people.
yeah. In that span of time, you became a writer.
Well, actually, I became a writer before that. I
Okay.
mean, I think I always wanted to write, but I began writing The Wild Mother, which was my first novel in my uh, senior year at college.
Okay.
And oh, there's a story there too, because I thought, oh, I went to take summer courses so that I could save room for a creative writing course my last semester. And you had to apply. So I applied and I submitted a short story and I got rejected.
Mm, mm,
It would have been I think it would have been a class on how do you get published in the New Yorker, probably. But I was devastated. And I had my American literature professor was he was very helpful and sympathetic. And I said, I don't need to take another credit. I don't want to take another class. So he basically mentored me and he basically told me he's the one who I kept writing these things that were supposedly realistic, but I didn't really know what I was talking about. And he said, go home and think about fairy tales.
mm.
There are only 5 or 6 plots in the world. You don't have to worry about it. Think about fairy tales. And that's how The Wild Mother came to me. And he told me at one point, I can't remember when it was, he says, you don't have to write a term paper. You write whatever you want to write.
Wow.
And then I started writing The Wild Mother and turned that in
Yes.
as my,
Yeah.
so
What a
he was a wonderful mentor.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, what a difference people like that can make in our lives. Just incredible.
Yeah, and also that to come out of being really crushed by being rejected, which
Yeah.
was only first of millions of rejections, but I got set on my path.
Can you speak to why you write? What was there for you?
Well, I think that a lot of writers really begin as avid readers. They love story from the beginning. I loved fairy tales, and of course, I also heard the stories in the Bible. So story
Mhm.
was like it was a way of life.
Yeah.
And of course, I wanted to write my own stories. And I remember one thing C.S. Lewis said, he was a big influence. Narnia was a big influence. And he said, and I don't know when I heard this, he said, I write the stories I want to read. And I think that stayed with me and it still stays with me because I've never I've never really quite fit a niche or a market category, but I've always written the stories that I wanted to read. And my father was very discouraging. My father did not want me to be a writer. He was rather vicious about it. But my
Mm.
mother was quietly encouraging. And she noticed that I liked to write, and she put me in a creative writing class one summer. And so I was like, yeah, I don't really want to be Cherry Ames or Sue Barton, although of course I probably thought I did because that's the kind of books girls read. But I think my mother really helped make it okay for me to say I wanted to be a writer, even though my father made it not okay.
Did you ever find out why your father was
Oh, I have my suspicions.
okay?
Well, there's a number of things. One is I think that he actually wanted to be an English major and probably wanted to write, and he was shamed for it, and I believe his father before him was shamed for it
Mm,
because in the kind of social gospel world that I grew up in and that they grew up in, because he was a minister, his father was a minister, his father was a minister, direct service was really the only thing that was considered service.
that was it. Yeah.
And anything to do with the arts, well, it could be like my grandfather wrote doggerel on for occasions, but it was frivolous and it was self-indulgent. And it wasn't. My father told me, and I've told this story many times, that I could not write because I knew nothing of the world, and I would really have to be a social worker before I could write. He might have said I should go into the ministry, but women didn't do that until 1976. They couldn't be ordained.
Right. Do you think he said that to you because you're a woman? Do you think he would have said that to you if you were his son?
No, I think he might have. I mean, he wasn't really in favor of writing.
Okay.
And I think partly because he was a frustrated writer,
Right.
a frustrated English major. He went back to get his master's at one point, and I don't think he completed it, but he was going to do it on D.H. Lawrence. So one of the things that I did was go into my father's study. I found Lady Chatterley's Lover, and I also found Victorian porn. So I learned words like quim and quivering. you know.
I love it. The numinous
Oh,
born. There's
I
something
also
in
found
there.
the Happy Hooker in my father's office, and my mother and I both read it and found it really interesting. She just was an interesting character.
Ah, it's great. I love it. Your process. Is there anything that you would like to share with respect to your process?
It involves a lot of procrastination.
I'm
I
glad
mean,
to.
not procrastination in the sense that I don't show up every day, but every day it's hard.
Mm.
And I write on the computer, but for many years I wrote 2 hand drafts in a spiral notebook, writing on every other line so that I could scribble and cross out. And I developed a saying, if you can't read it, you don't need it. That I apply that as I revised. But I think one of the things I'd like to say about process, I had a really hilarious dream once where I was on stage and I had my little spiral notebooks and I wrote, and then I got up and I went to the bathroom, and then I did this and I did that and I did the other thing, and then I came back and I wrote some more, and then I held up my scribbly notebook with 2 pages filled and I said, ladies and gentlemen, believe it or not, this is how novels get written. I think right now what I do is I do a little bit of a poem journal. Then I also have a little talk with the muse, who is sometimes we're working out the problems in the story and sometimes she's like my therapist. And then it's like, okay, we really have to work on the story now. And believe it or not, this is how novels get written.
How did Maeve show up?
Oh, and I should have brought one. I don't have the Book of Madge, but she's very naked too. Um, Madge, the Book of Madge, Deb mentioned a graphic novel, which you can now actually get. I had finished writing The Return of the Goddess, a divine comedy, which was the first time I realized that I was involved with the goddess. So I wrote about it and I said it at that same church where I grew up. And I put everything into it. And then I thought, I have nothing more to say. I'm done saying anything. So an artist friend suggested that I draw for a while. So I got magic markers and I started to scribble. And then there she was. And I didn't know her name was Madge, but she told me pretty quick. And she was sitting naked in the kitchen drinking coffee at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which turns out to be the time of day I was born. I may have run out of things to say, but she hadn't. She needed a lot of cartoon balloons. And so I thought, wow, what a great character. And she also told me she was a prostitute, no question, because she was a painter and she was having a hard time making a living. So she, no bones about it. That's what she did. And I thought, wow, you're a great character. Would you like to be in my next novel? And she said, I don't know. We'll see. I kept thinking of ideas, and one of them involved her being a retired prostitute going off to Maine. She says, I'm not ready to be a retired anything. She said, you make me my book, you make me a book of cartoons and then we'll talk. So she actually got a book of cartoons, which is now called the Book of Madge, which I wrote during the first Gulf War, which was back in 1990, and actually only lasted 6 weeks, which is amazing to think of now. And there actually were congressional hearings about it where people held forth.
Yeah.
And so I drew a lot while I was listening to that. And so she was a peace prostitute and she got her book. And then she was satisfied with that. And then one night it was very warm. I think in February, and I may have gone out in the moonlight naked, possibly. I can't remember now. But it came to me, I have been talking to my husband about Mary Magdalene, and it came to me that Magdalene and Madge had a lot of the same letters. And she had this very, very red, fiery orange hair. And I thought, oh, what if you were red hair, Celt? What if you were the Celtic Mary Magdalene? How about that book? And she's like, yeah, finally. And by that, I never knew whether she meant that she was ready for that or she was waiting for that or that's who she was or that was sufficiently outrageous to appeal to her. Could be either.
Could be all the above. Right.
Yeah, all of the above. So that's how she started. And that also really affected, she already had a voice. So instead of saying, oh, I'm going to write this book set in the first century, I did write 4 books set in the first century, but the narrator can be completely immersed in the first century, telling you moment by moment what's happening. And she can also come out and talk to you as if she's there in the room with you. And she can have a very sassy contemporary voice, and she does.
Yes.
So it's really kind of different from a lot of historical novels because its premise is, and it really does immerse you in the history, but she can also say, hey, I'm telling you this story. I need you to hear it. I haven't been able to tell it before.
Just so full of wisdom and yet this very willful, strong, independent woman who just puts it all out there.
And never converts.
Right.
She is the lover of Jesus, but not a disciple.
Right.
She loves him.
I love that.
She ain't gonna follow him.
Out of this menagerie, this amazing collection, you created music.
Yeah, and that's because I went on tour, and I was inspired by a couple of friends, Tom Cowan and Rihanna Mirabello. I heard them do a recital of Mary Oliver's poems, and they memorized them. So I said, oh, that's so different from reading. I'm not going to do a reading. I'm going to memorize a passage. I'm going to memorize the prologue because Passion of Mary Magdalene was the first book I really toured with a lot. And in order to memorize, the Celts have the ancient Celts call learning your lessons or memorizing to sing over. So I would sing as a memory aid. And that's how, and so I said, oh, I like how that prologue sounds. I'm just going to walk out and hit them with the prologue. So that's what I did. Yeah. And so then with each book, I found other songs.
Well, I have Into the Night and I have the Pentecostal Alley Blues. What do you think we should play?
I think you should play Into the Night first because that's the one that I opened with.
Yes.
Hundreds of times in hundreds of performances.
Okay, let's do that. Okay, so here we go.
This story begins in the night. There will be a dawn, I promise. I will also tell of mornings when I didn't want to wake, and noons full of harsh light and judgment. Sometimes There will be ease and shade in the afternoon, camaraderie and rest, even pleasure. There will be passion, I promise, morning, noon, and night, season after season, passion that breaks time open wide, so you can taste the mystery inside. Well, this story begins in the night. It begins in the middle of the story, in the middle of the night. When the thief comes, when the bridegroom comes, when the bride has long since given up hope, and those foolish virgins, they're snoring, when only a whore is awake.
I need to give some credits here. I did not have the wonderful piano with me when I was on tour. Tim Curenton, Dillinger Curenton, and Ray Curenton Dillinger are my publishers now. And I think in 2009, I met Tim, and he said, and I sang that bit of prologue for him. And he said, "Oh, well, you know, we're going to go to Nashville, which is where he was from, and record it, and I'll find musicians." And so the man on the piano is Ron Gilmore, and he's a brilliant musician, and he improvised with me.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
beautiful.
he was improvising. I knew what I was singing, and there are a few other songs that three or four songs that he also plays on, that he just came in the studio and he played. He got it. We didn't rehearse.
Wow.
So thank you, Ron Gilmore. Thank you, Tim Dillinger. Thank you, Ray Curenton. Thank you, everybody who helped. And I am going to blank. When we get to the guitar, I'm afraid I'm going to blank on the musician's name, but you should make sure you look, if you get the album, look who it is. So anyway, thanks to all the musicians that supported that album.
When you listen, you can feel that everybody was right there. Just
Yeah,
right there with you.
And on Mount, there's a couple of songs that Tim sings harmony on. So Tim Dillinger fans,
Yep.
you should get it.
He might even be watching this evening.
He should be. If he isn't, I'm going to be. Yeah. Anyway, we'll deal with that later, Tim.
Elizabeth, what has Maeve brought to you? Has she changed you at all, or have you changed her? Or
She's tried. I mean, I think people make the mistake of thinking that I am Maeve, or that Maeve is modeled on me, but really I'm more modeled on her. Maeve she goes through a lot of troubles, which, you know, she gets enslaved, she has a hard time, she goes through many tragedies, but the way she was raised, she was the daughter of 8 warrior witch mothers on an island of women, and they just thought she could do no wrong. She was so great. So Maeve, unlike many women, most women, probably most people, but especially women, she had very high self-esteem. She loved herself, she loved her body, and she had no shame, no concept of shame. The first experience she had of shame was when she was enslaved, because among Celts, that was a shame. That was a source of terrible shame.
right.
So she matured, but this very brazen, willful young woman, she is in Magdalene Rising. Like, wow. And I have women say, I wish I had been raised like that. So I think that she gave a lot of women, including me, a taste of what would it be like to be raised, to have no question that you love your body and you love yourself and you are all that.
It's never too late to think about that, to let that inform who you are. Yeah. And I can't recommend the Maeve series enough. It's just it's spectacular. It's life-changing. And I know people who have said after they've read your books that it has changed their life. And you know, I can say the same thing. These are works of art that deserve your attention if you don't know about them already.
Oh, thank you, Deb. And Yeah, and I think the thing about Maeve that still amazes me, and I don't think every writer gets to have this, I feel very lucky. She lives in other people's lives so independently. She doesn't just stay in the book.
Yeah, yes,
And I
that's
love
so
that
true.
about her.
Yes,
She gets around. I don't even know what she gets up to.
she does get
Uh,
around. She
Yeah,
does.
and I don't know. She may inspire people to do some things that, well, I'm not going to be responsible for them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's all good
yeah,
in
it's
the
all
end.
good. She is good. She
Yes,
is,
an excellent
just because
influence.
she has no shame doesn't mean that she has no morals. She does.
I'd like to play the other song, Pentecostal Alley Blues, because I think it's perfect for right this minute. And then
And that comes in the third book when
yeah,
she's already had her life with Jesus and well, you'll find out.
we will not give any secrets away.
Yeah. We're no spoilers.
No spoilers here, but we'll play this song and then we'll move into your poetry.
Well, some say I'm a whore, and some say I'm his bride. You know, some folks call me a whore, and some say I'm his holy bride. All I know is I'm in the alley and I'm heaving up my insides. Well, some folks say I'm the number one disciple of the bunch. You know, some folks call me the number one disciple of the bunch. But me, I'm in the alley and I'm tossing up my lunch.
I'm just playing a snippet tonight.
Yeah.
You know, I also want to say I really would love to someday see these made into a series on one of the streaming
Yeah,
platforms.
I would.
From the beginning, it just feels like that's something has to happen here. So if there's anybody out there listening, let's think about that, right? Talk to Elizabeth. These books deserve to have a series. All right, poetry. How did poetry sneak in there?
It snuck. And I probably I still primarily identify as a novelist and a storyteller. And a lot, but I don't know. I mean, I think I know I always wrote it. I used to call it emergency poetry because there was nothing else I could do. But then I forget exactly when it was, probably almost 10 years ago now. I decided that I really did not want to write a prose journal anymore, that I was tired of hearing myself. And so I decided, well, whatever you say, you've got to write. It's got to be in some kind of a form as a poem. You've got to distill it. And I had full license to write terrible poems. I just didn't want to hear about my problems anymore. So I started to write a poetry journal. And gradually over the years, it sort of started just like, well, it's a poem because I say it's a poem, it's a poem, you know.
Yeah.
But I got really interested in forms as well. And I would not say that I'm primarily a poet, but I've written a lot of poetry.
Hmm. Would you share this evening?
Yeah. So this is my latest collection. And it's a little different because I would say that all the other ones are, poems that I wrote and I'm the poet. And, I like them well enough. But in this one, there's all these different voices. There are trees that speak, there are stones that speak, there's someone called Ancient Dreamer, there's someone called Temple Sweeper. There's a lot of different characters. I wrote, they started coming right after I finished, because I want to hold this up again. After I finished this book, which is a big, fat novel set in 1968, and it's pretty serious subject matter. It's fun and funny in places too, but it's set in this world. It has elements of fairy tale. All my books do. Wait till you meet Robin Hoodlum. But I just couldn't write anything. I couldn't write anything like that anymore. And I was writing these voices. I had been writing them before I started that book, and I thought I'll just keep going. And then I wrote that book, and then I came back. So this is a book of all these voices that I heard when I moved to the Shwangungs. Because there's amazing stones here. There's amazing rivers
Mhm.
here. And I think a lot of us are sort of thinking about what would it be like to just be wandering around the last, I don't know. It's a very imaginative book. There are so many different, I'll just read you what the voices are. Scribe, Mother Rain, Sorrow Singer, Gray Cat, Gray Mouse, Courage Singer, Temple Sweeper, Sword Woman, Goat Boy, Mother Goat, Stone Mountain, Ravens, Ancient Dreamer, The Man Who Does Not Speak, Merry Drunk, Morose Fool, Great Oak, Stream, Stillness, Red Oak, Skeleton Woman, she's fun. And the grannies, Onyx, Opal, Ruby, and Lapis Lazuli, the bear, the children, Flying Pig. So I published this book last year myself, and it's available. And I think it's really different. What I'm going to do is a really, really, really short one because I remember it. I did a performance with Rebecca Singer and other people last year. And I'm going to speak it and then I'm going to sing it. And it is about story. And I think in a lot of ways it's about our time because we're so worried about what is going to happen. And is it, the worst going to happen? We don't know. But anyway, this poem is called The Scribes Task. When rivers carry mountains to the strand, the scribe must stand midstream to catch the muddy gold in her hand. And when she sees the sea rise to meet the land, she must remember every story holds the power to surprise. When rivers carry mountains to the strand, the scribe must stand midstream to catch the muddy gold in her hand. And when she sees the sea rise to meet the land, she must remember, she must remember, she must remember. Every story holds the power to surprise. Every story holds the power to surprise.
Elizabeth, I've heard you talk lately about a shift in consciousness, and I think the shift is happening collectively around in our world. I know I ascribe to it, and it's this realization, this acknowledgement that the natural world is not other, that we are very much a part of the
That's
natural
what
world.
the book is about.
Yeah, right. And
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about that shift for yourself? Because I do think it's a shift for probably all of us.
A lot of people,
Because
yes.
we had mythology we had to slog through to find the truth, if you will.
And I think in some ways it's not new, it's very old. And some peoples have always known
Yeah.
that, first of all, that the Earth is one organism. We're an expression of it, I guess. Sometimes I'm what was Earth thinking? But that all the trees, the plants, the insects, the birds, the fish, everything is a being.
Right.
I like to call them beings, like my kitty, who's been here the whole time. She's a feline being, and there are arboreal beings. And I think that people are finding out. They're finding out a lot of things that probably, like I say, other people's always knew. But one of the things they're finding out is that trees can communicate through
Absolutely.
their roots, through the mycelium.
Yep.
And that there might be trees that have issues with each other, but trees also help each other. That they're not they're not, we think, oh, there's this tree, it's standing there, it's by itself, tree. But it's actually part of a community, and we're part of its community, and all the birds and the squirrels and everything around it are part of its community.
Yep.
Um, so I've come to the point where, sometimes I write about how much I like solitude and I like to be alone. But then I think I'm not alone. I can't say I like to be alone outside, because when I'm outside, I'm not alone
Right.
at all.
Right.
I'm
So
with all those other beings, and it humbles me to think that. I mean, there's a lot of I do recognize a lot of my neighbors, but I bet they know a lot more about me than I know about them. Um, they say, "Oh, there's Liz. She comes out every time about this time." Yeah, I think that we had a horrible idea of thinking that things were inert or not sensate, or the animals had lesser intelligence. They don't. Everything has intelligence,
yeah.
with the possible exception of some human beings
We,
who are
we won't go there.
smart by half, as they say. Yeah. So I think that a lot of, I mean, yeah, I think that is a shift that many people are becoming. Everybody's become. We have to become aware of it.
We have
Because
to.
we can't go on doing what we're doing. We can't go on just saying, "Oh, well, there's oil there. Let me take it."
It seems like part of our evolutionary process.
Yeah.
And as we get a little bit deeper into this crisis mode with the planet, I think that this awakening had to happen, and it's so frustrating that there are people who don't yet understand it, and there will be people who pass through this earthly realm who don't ever understand it, who don't ever get it, and I think it's up to us, as artists or as human beings who feel this strongly about this, to have conversations, to start talking about it with our families and friends.
And to start listening to the things that are trying to talk to us.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
You said when you go outside and you walk alone and you're not alone, and it's an extraordinary way to be with other beings. Is to just,
Yeah.
go for a walk in the woods, or just be,
Pay attention.
yeah, just to pay attention, to really, really just be present. Thank you for that. I just wanted to, I know that's something we share. So the premise of the show is, what's art got to do with it? And artists and culture bearers more and more, are not only witnessing, but, participating. We're influencing, disrupting. There's this idea about artistic intervention, which I would posit that maybe we artists are always intervening in some way. And I'm wondering what your take is, what your thoughts are for you as an artist.
What's art got to
Came to the surface for you?
to the question, what's art got to do with it?
Yeah, what's art got to do with it?
I think art has everything to do with everything, because when I think about, well, why, like sometimes I really do think, why are we here, and why, we are kind of making a mess. But I think, and I think when I say art and artists, I don't just mean people that are writing or painting or composing. I think I really mean all of us,
Yes.
because I think that if we have a purpose, and yes, we do have to clothe ourselves and shelter ourselves and feed ourselves. So there's things that we need to do. But I think really, if we're here, it's mostly to say, to reflect back and mirror what we see, and to be amazed and in wonder and in gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a beautiful fall, which I really feel grateful for, because it has been dry. And there was one year, 2017, it was so dry that the trees just went brown. But there's so much color. I mean, sometimes I feel like I can't. I have to get bigger to take it all in.
I know.
And in the journal that I've alluded to, my first thing that I write every day now is something called Noticing Beauty, and I write down, because I'm not a photographer, I don't go around with a camera. I go around saying, "Oh, I see," and I remember it, so that I can write down what I noticed.
Yes.
So I think that to sing, to dance, to tell a story, to build a beautiful dwelling, to make beautiful food, to tend people beautifully. I think it's all art, and I think that we are here to really do things that give back in that way, whether it's painting a picture, whether it's making a bed, or
Yes,
Yes. Washing a dish.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think which mindfulness isn't really part of my I've heard people talk about it. I'm that's not really my background, but I think maybe that is also what I mean by art.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. Elizabeth, this has been great. This has been as magical as I thought it would be, actually more so. Would you just tell us what's on the horizon for you?
Yeah, my website is elizabethcunninghamwrites.com. You can get sign up for my newsletter, which I don't write very often. But I'm still writing. I'm writing another book. I'm writing a book that is more in the realm of fairy tale because I can't. I tried for a year to write a book that was sort of contemporary in this world, and it's like I can't do it. There's too much happening. So I'm writing another fairy tale, and I have, I take care of my garden and my kitty, and I do what I can in the world.
And All the Perils of the Night is the latest issue
Yeah,
of the book, and
I'm
yeah,
gonna hold it up with Murder at the Rome Show because they're so pretty together. And Ray Carrington Dillinger designed these beautiful
yeah,
covers.
they're great covers.
He
Yep,
hand drew, I mean, he hand designed these. He's a very, and they're musicians, and oh, they have so many things going on.
they
But
do.
they do a beautiful job with these books. So yeah, and they're fun. Just because you love Maeve doesn't mean you won't love Murder at the Rummersdale and All the Perils of This Night.
Are you ready for the lightning round?
Yeah, I am.
All right. What makes you awestruck, makes you say, wow?
Well, I think we just talked about a lot of it, like wandering around in the autumn. But I think particularly, I came to gardening, flower gardening, very late in life. That really opened my eyes to plants.
Mm.
So I walk around seeing as much as I can. And that's kind of how I learn. I haven't really taken courses or read too many books. I just watch and I go, wow, wow. Like the other day, I saw this little tiny pink flower that is grows in the grass, mostly in the summer. There was one just blooming the other day, and it's like, wow, wow, you're still there.
Yeah. What is the kindest thing someone has ever done for you?
So I decided to go with the first thing that came into my head because there's too many. But I remember when one of an old kitty, one of our first cat in our family, had to be euthanized, and we had to take her to the vet. And I was holding her in my arms, and I was crying, and the whole family was with me, both my children and my husband. And my daughter took a tissue and wiped my tears
Mm.
as I was holding the cat. And she was a teenager at the time, and it was particularly touching.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. What a moment. What a beautiful
Yeah.
moment. Mm. What is your favorite tree?
My
Favorite tree?
favorite tree. Oh, that's another hard one, but I think I have, and I don't know that this was always so, but I have a special relationship with oaks,
Ah, yes.
red oaks and white oaks and all kinds of oaks. And I love beeches also because that word means book, actually. I love their skin.
Mhm. What is your favorite smell?
Oh, there's in the hedgerows, probably it's considered invasive. I just learned its name this year. It's called autumn olive. It has sort of silvery leaves. And for
Mm.
about a week or two in the spring, it's got little white flowers that give off a scent that I call the scent of heaven.
Mm.
That's my favorite scent.
Mm.
And then they have little berries in the fall, which I tasted, but that I live for that moment in spring when they come out and I can walk all around the yard and the field
What is
smelling
it
that
called?
scent.
What is it called again?
It's called autumn olive.
Ah,
And
ah.
it has silvery leaves and it blooms in the spring, and the blooms are, they're just little white blooms, but that scent is amazing. And
Mm.
it's considered, of course, it's considered invasive, but I love it.
And what is your least favorite smell?
Diesel fuel.
Oh,
Surprise, surprise.
yeah. And what is your favorite kitchen utensil?
Yeah, I really am not a very inventive tool user, but I have a little serrated knife. It's not that little, it's about that big. I like it because it's very firm and I can cut pretty much anything with it unless I need to use a wok knife or something.
It's great.
I love it. And I say, "Where's my knife?" when I can't find it.
Thank you. Thank you for being a good sport with those lightning round of questions. It's kind of fun to hear what people say, and I appreciate
Oh,
it.
it is a great questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much
Deb.
for this time. I wish you all the great success with Perils of the Night, your new book that you're working on, and all the books and writing and music yet to come, and poetry. Just really grateful for you for this
Yes.
shared time this evening. Thank you.
And right back at you and your work, which is also multifaceted, and you are multi-talented.
Thank you
Thank
very
you for inviting me here.
Absolutely. So thank you all for watching. Art and creative expression is one way to imagine a different future. Let's stay curious. Let's stay in conversation. Let's stay in our creating places. Love you all. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.